Yeah, we had this sort of slightly drunken evening, and they'd come up with this name, and they were like, "Oh, it means Mother Earth in African." And straight as soon as they said African, I was like, "What are you talking about?" There's like hundreds of languages. So I googled it, and sure enough, it meant toilet in Swahili. So I was like, I don't think we'd get away with that.
Can you remember the name?
It was Uwa, UWA.
I mean, it does sound like lure, which is kind of like toilet.
Yeah, I think it was one of those sort of pub chat things that got a bit out of hand, and then we were like, okay. But they didn't. Then they came up with "and," which we all really liked.
Trials, tribulations, mistakes, barriers, successes and failures. Hear it here firsthand from those that have grown billion-dollar businesses to those that are just starting out. Winner of the Campaign Publishing Award for Best Business Podcast in the UK, Success is in the Mind is the only place where you can get a sense of business reality in a world full of idealism. Everyone claims to be an entrepreneur, but can everyone live up to the title? What does it take to start a business, to get your product into a high street store, or grow a well-managed team? I'm Oliver Bruce, founder and entrepreneur myself. Join me as I interview business leaders and founders from across the globe, delving into what makes them tick, their differentiators and intrinsic motivators. This is Success is in the Mind. Thank you so much to our headline sponsors for the year, Capsule Cover. Capsule Cover, a specialist insurance partner to growth businesses, supports some of the UK's most innovative and ambitious companies. Sponsoring each and every one of our podcasts, we're on a journey with Capsule, and so should you be. If you're a scale-up or an ambitious, high-growth business, check out how Capsule Cover can help you with bespoke insurance solutions. Inquire via capsulecover.com and quote Success22. In this episode, I speak to sustainable perfume and fragrance entrepreneur Simon Constantine. Founder of And Fragrance, Simon is a man on a mission to help indigenous communities to preserve their endangered ecosystems by sustainably sourcing raw materials. Simon, who worked for his parents' business Lush for nearly 20 years, decided to go it alone in May 2019. Working in tandem with his father Mark Constantine, who founded Lush, Simon is best known for creating the most challenging Lush scents, among them the acclaimed Breath of God. In this Christmas episode of Success is in the Mind, I asked Simon how hard it was going from one of the UK's favourite brands into the world of startup, what does the future of perfume and fragrance sourcing look like, and what was his initial brand name, which meant toilet in Swahili. Ladies and gentlemen, fragrance entrepreneur Simon Constantine.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm really well. Happy Christmas.
Thank you very much. Merry Christmas to you.
Obviously, you're the son of the founders of Lush, Mark Constantine. You are Simon Constantine. You worked for Lush for 20-odd years before jumping ship in May 2019 and starting your own business And Fragrance. What was it like working for Lush, for such a large business brand, one of the UK's favourite brands, to then starting something that nobody had heard of?
It's pretty daunting, as you can imagine, especially with a sort of family connection and kind of... and everything that goes with it. But to be honest, actually, Lush wasn't the first business that I saw my parents kind of co-found, if you like. They worked, I was basically born into, our house was a factory. So when I was born, my first memories are of mum and dad in the shed or out the back. Sometimes it wasn't actually legal for them to be manufacturing cosmetics at home. I think they did get caught in the end and had to get a proper factory. But up until then, until I was about 2 or 3 years old, I was completely surrounded by, start-up business, really. So I think at that point, it's in your blood. So it felt daunting, but also quite natural.
Because, in terms of what they were doing prior to Lush or prior to the first business that they co-founded then, what was that? Because they founded Lush in 1995 and, you perfectly led me into that question. You must have been born into that entrepreneurial world.
Yeah, up until, so from when I was born, they had a company called Constantine and Weir, which was a small beauty company, and they had their shop on Poole High Street. They started to supply, by the time I came along, I think they were supplying Body Shop when Body Shop was still quite a young, very young business when they first supplied and was still quite young. And they worked very hand in glove with Body Shop, creating, lots of exciting products and championing things like non-animal testing and environmentalism and all the things that Body Shop became so well known for. And then they parted company as a supplier with Body Shop and started another business which was almost run entirely off of crazy ideas that Body Shop didn't want, and it was called Cosmetics to Go. And then that went under in the sort of recessions of the 90s. There was a series of kind of sort of tragedies, if you like, within the business that led to it folding. and Lush came out of that.
Wow, okay. So it was kind of, it was very much like what we've just been through with the pandemic, the ups and downs. So did you go into the pandemic with a kind of different view, different vision? I mean, you started And Fragrance during the midst of the pandemic. Was that just simply because you weren't scared, having seen what your parents had gone through?
I think there's a mixture of, in fact, my dad's mentioned it before as well, of being mildly stupid.
Naive.
Yes, but it turns out it's mostly stupid. Do you know? But yeah, I think so. We actually we had the plans in the works. So I'd already been working with Chris Morey, who's my co-founder for And Fragrance. So he's really sort of the marketing and brand side of things. We've been working on this concept for a number of months. And obviously nobody plans for a pandemic to sort of come along right when you're about ready to launch. We got to March and we were like, oh, okay, we bought all the packaging, we've got all the material, we're not far off being able to launch. And then the dreaded COVID came along, and we had to sort of make a decision. Are we, is it too frivolous for us to be doing this right now? Which we actually was our first decision. Say, look, there's a really serious event happening here, launching a fragrance brand in the middle of it. Is that really what people are going to want? But because of the way we structured and because of the ethical nature of it and the project partners, we actually got in touch with a number of them and said, like, how are you guys doing? Just genuinely reaching out, making sure everybody was all right. And one of the project partners over in the east of the Amazon in Brazil said that they were really worried about the impacts of COVID. And so it really actually changed our shift. We were going to do a fundraiser as part of our initial launch offering for the brand, and just to sort of set the tone, if you like, even if we weren't there financially to be able to support ongoing communities right at the very startup phase, we wanted to set that tone. And they came back and said that they wanted they could really do with PPE, because back then COVID hadn't arrived. A lot of remote tribal communities, so we didn't actually feel as frivolous at that point. Felt like people actually were interested in it.
But did you not do some kind of fundraise around the PPE side of things for the third world and again, those that were more disadvantaged?
Yeah, so this initial offering was only 100 bottles. I was doing them at that point in my lounge. So we were kind of all crammed in. I just spent this last week cleaning up after finally moving everything out of our lounge, because
well done, big milestone.
Yes, it was nice, actually. It was nice. Found all sorts of things tucked down back of the sofa and whatnot. Yes. So we were all sort of piled in there, and we did the first 100 bottles, which we sold very quickly, actually, which was a good indication of how people felt at that point. They wanted to sort of still support one another even if they couldn't physically, and fragrance was kind of an interesting way of connecting people to that. And so first 100 bottles, which was about £3,000, I think, we managed to raise, and all that money went for PPE for the Kaipo via the Rowney Institute. So the Kaipo are the people who actually we source our tonka from, that goes into the product, which is bean. So there was this reciprocal kind of loop. It felt like it was self-supporting at that point.
It's really interesting. We'll get into later on how you ethically source, I suppose, the fragrance side of things and the raw materials. But dialing back the clock ever so slightly to when you were growing up and around that dining room table, your parents are obviously focusing heavily on building their brand, building their business. As a child, where did that put you? Did it put you to one side? Did you go to boarding school? What was your kind of actual childhood like?
No, I didn't go to boarding school, no.
They didn't ship you off then?
No. What was really nice about having parents with the business is that everybody assumes you have the silver spoon.
Yeah, but you don't.
Yeah, and you have almost, I wouldn't say the exact opposite. I wouldn't say, but there's definitely tough times.
I like to call it a rusty fork rather than a silver spoon.
Yeah, it's normally sort of stabbed into you at some point if you've been misbehaved.
Exactly.
Yeah, so I think actually that there is a lot of bumps in the road, and I think probably on reflection as I left Lush and started out, I kind of looked at the impact of having a business like that as part of your everyday life, and it really becomes kind of another family member. So at that point it became almost like, because I've got two siblings, so it became like the fourth sibling, if you like, around, you chat about it around the kitchen table. It would be it still is a conversation point. If I see everybody, we still talk about Lush, and I've still got connections there. And it was a bit kind of, it's almost a bit false to say you've resigned, because it's a bit like quitting your family. Yeah. As much as you'd like to. Do you know what I mean? At different points, it's a bit difficult to sort of fire your mum.
God, I wish I could do that.
It's always been I would consider it more of a family member, actually, than a straightforward business.
But in terms of going into the business then, because essentially you'd been at Lush for 20 odd years, you'd worked your way all the way up to the top in terms of sitting on the board. You know, you were famed for working alongside your dad, looking at those complex ingredients, looking at those ethical kind of sourcing mechanisms. Would you have done what you're doing now had it not been for that? Would you have even gone into the world of fragrance?
I think it's really interesting because I have sort of asked the question to myself a few times, and I think my general interest, I mean, I was very lucky actually, which is evident, but incredibly privileged and lucky to have a business like Lush to be able to sort of be a part of. And the opportunities that arose were genuine opportunities. They were opportunities at the time to get involved in fragrance and to get involved in ethical ingredients because there were issues in a small and growing business. You know, when I joined, I can't remember what size Lush was, but I don't think it had broken sort of 20 million turnover at that point. So still reasonable, but it was definitely on the up. But the curve was incredibly steep at that time. And having watched how my mum and dad work and that founding team, they really do like to champion people from the factory floor, from the shop floor, and bring them on. So it felt more like you were in the mix with everybody, and the opportunities that came along were just absolutely amazing, and they were things I'm genuinely interested in. I went to art college. I was interested in the artistic expression of fragrance. I was interested in travel, interested in where things came from, and fair trade. So it just felt like it's hard to detach yourself from your journey at that point.
Talk to me about the Guerrilla perfume side that you sort of headed up with your dad, Mark, in terms of what that was, because you know you had the Breath of God as a famed perfume, which you guys obviously rolled out. Now, you know, why did you decide to go on that completely different tangent from the pretty bath bombs that we know Lush for, down to this quite aggressive and kind of guerrilla orientated branding?
Yeah, I mean, when you're saying, I think you're assuming there was a logical straight path to the creative process, right? And although I'd love to think that is how my mind works, I think it doesn't. There's a lot of where people look in, I always get this impression people are going, what? Why is he doing that now? What's he doing now? That doesn't make sense. But Guerrilla was really a part of that kind of evolution, if you like. There was the obvious thing to do with perfume in Lush, and then I think it being our family being the way it is, the people within the business being the way they are, then there was the interesting thing to do, and to take fragrance and put it alongside other creative outlets and sort of more expressive and kind of really, at that point we were looking at music and at kind of street art and a lot of those kind of influences, and seeing how that bleeds into fragrance and how fragrance actually, it doesn't have to be a pure marketing exercise, which was our biggest chip on our shoulder at that point. It's just over a decade ago, just saying there's very little in the sort of niche artisan world. Why isn't there a thriving underground like there is with music or art or even cooking or fashion? You know, like, why is it that it's a sort of afterthought? So that was where that came from.
Because you've kind of taken elements of Guerrilla perfumes into and fragrance. From a visual standpoint, it looks quite similar. You can kind of see the synergy there. Was that, again, logical, or was that totally illogical and accidental?
That was actually because Chris and his colleague Chris, they both have marketing backgrounds, and they kind of took on the branding and marketing side and came up with this really kind of punky look and this sort of edgy, and there is an aggressive tone in there still, I think, in terms of a frustrated kind of the world stinks kind of tone. Unfortunately, I think they channeled me, and we've ended up in that kind of, yeah, if I'm the muse, if you like, for those guys, I think that's why we've ended up in I would say it's an evolved place, but there are definite nods to Guerrilla, and there's definite, huge nods to my past and kind of what I've done in the past.
100%. And you said when you joined Lush, it was just teetering on the edge of maybe 20 million revenue. It went way, way, way beyond that. But then you obviously jumped ship to go and start And Fragrance. What was it like going from such a structured, high turnover business to something which essentially, you have said last week you finished clearing out your front room. You're literally back at home. What's it like going through that?
Sometimes it's really exciting and interesting, and other times it's very familiar. Like I say, our kitchen or my mum's shed or the house when I was growing up was very similar to our house has been in the last couple of years with homeschooling kids. We weren't homeschooled, but you've got kids around, you've got all of this stuff going on, and it was all very kind of blended. So from that perspective, it has been familiar, but also, it's very challenging. And it's also, I sometimes forget how far we came with Lush and how far you go back to starting again, and you have to kind of ground yourself pretty often. Oh no, I can't do this, beautiful campaign. I can't do this beautiful thing that I'd like to do right now because we're trying to actually get a business started here, which I get reminded of again by Chris, my business partner. He reminds me of that quite often.
And in terms of you working with your business partner, Chris, and him running a large proportion of the marketing and the branding, what was the brand name that meant toilet in Swahili?
Yeah, we had this sort of slightly drunken evening where the two Chris's, as I'm now going to call them, and myself, we were out, we were kind of chatting about it, and they'd come up with this name, and they were definitely keen on it. And I was like, I don't know. And they were like, it means Mother Earth in African. As soon as they said African, I was like, what are you talking about? There's like hundreds of languages. Like I've travelled it quite extensively. It's like, that doesn't mean anything African. Yes. So I Googled it, and sure enough, it meant toilet in Swahili. So I was like, I don't think we get away with that.
Can you remember the name?
It was Uwa. UWA.
I mean, it does sound like lure, which is kind of like toilet.
Yeah, I think it was one of those sort of pub chat things that got a bit out of hand, and then we were like, okay. But they didn't. Then they came up with "and," which we all really liked. So
talk to me about the methodology though around "and," because it is so unique.
Well, we're looking for a word that, I'm very interested in this topic, which is this move beyond sustainable to regenerative. I think this is becoming more well known. You've got regenerative agriculture and all that, and this kind of move was always about plus. It was always something, and it was always about evolution and moving forwards and natural patterns and all of these kind of things. So when the word came up, you had the word we all know generally as "and," as this kind of plus feel, which I liked. But then when we went deeper on the kind of background of it, it was this Nordic English word. I say Nordic English because the way I looked at it was we weren't appropriating that word because it was brought over to England by nutcase raiders. From so, but I don't know whether we edit that bit out. Yeah, that's what I'm in the sort of 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, there we go.
And that meant in general means ghost and spirit and breath, and so we quite liked that kind of connotation and kind of that path. And I'm sure there's plenty of linguists out there that will say no, it doesn't quite mean that, which is also fair enough. That's what their intention is.
Yeah, well, exactly. That's the logic behind it. Anyway, it's explainable, which would pass, I think, in a GCSE exam if you can explain the logic behind it. So, in terms of where you want to go, then, in terms of scale, do you want to have 900 odd stores? Do you want to be based just in Dorset and go online? I tried to find you guys on other e-commerce websites. It's only your own brand website that you can buy your product on.
That's right. At the moment, we are just on our website, fragrance.com. Ching! And we have our outlet in Poole. We've been very lucky then to be invited into Debenhams revamp, which was, as Debenhams fell away, Bobby's came into Bournemouth. So Bournemouth is just up the road from Poole. And it's an independent store that's been taken over by a property developer, and then they've brought Bobby's back, which was what was in the building before Debenhams had it. So There's this really interesting proposition. This is what I mean. We found ourselves in really interesting spaces there, and I'm fascinated with how we kind of then navigate this market out. We are chatting with distributors. We are looking at, so we are actually stocked in Australia at the moment, and we've been very opportunistic. People have approached us and we've said, let's give that a go, and that's been quite interesting. So we are in talks. So our next phase really is about setting up this distribution so that we are available in more places. Not that there's anything wrong with Poole High Street.
In terms of Australia and international expansion, why go to Australia and not focus on conquering the UK's distribution first? Do you think you're going to take on too much?
I don't think we will at the moment because we've got quite a kind of tight rein on it. It's manageable from that perspective. I think that is a very good question, and it's something that I think comes back to this kind of scale thing of being used to a certain scale and going, oh, hang on, if there's only 4 of you, you can't pull off 19 different markets all at once. So it's kind of about sustained growth. So I think and this is it's almost like you've been sat in the room with me and Chris. We've both actually we changed seats a little bit on that. Some days he's saying, oh, we should be in America now, we should be doing that, and other days I am, and then we're saying, no, let's focus on the UK. Europe seemed like an easy task actually until Brexit finally crunched. and now we can't. Yeah, we're struggling to ship anything there, so that's another set of hurdles. So there's, it's very, and with such uncertain times, we're taking little opportunities and then maintaining a sort of basic strategy of, like you say, let's get UK sorted out. Let's look at this market. Let's look at that market.
We look at COP26 now, and we look at the way the world is understanding finally, just about maybe, environmentalism and making sure that the world is sustainable. Now, looking at what you're doing for the fragrance and perfume industry, fundamentally, you're making sure that the raw materials are sourced ethically and sustainably, right? That is quite before the time, because there's not many perfume manufacturers or brands out there that are, pushing this line as hard as you are. Do you think this is the future?
Well, I certainly think, if we've talked about Lush, and the journey that I kind of was a part of there was a lot of what is now very poignant and very current. People at Lush tended to be quite far ahead of the time. So a lot of the formulations, a lot of the kind of creativity, a lot of the branding, a lot of the focus, it could be anything from non-animal testing to regenerative agriculture to shampoo bars. I got approached the other day by a marketing guy who had a report on the shampoo bar market, and I remember when my mum invented it in 1988 in the shed, and now there's people getting money from telling you about the shampoo bar market. I did sort of send him a facetious email, but he didn't get it.
Go on, what did the email say?
I just sort of said, well, I do remember making them in my mum's shed for my summer holidays, blah, blah, blah. And I
wish you the best of luck, exactly.
Yes, yeah, it was a bit like that. I didn't swear, but...
Mark as spam, exactly.
So I do think, I think with and, there is a driving purpose. There is a reason why we're a little bit thorny, a little bit pointy, and saying, look, to the industry, is that we don't have the same timescale that Lush had when it was trying to challenge the cosmetic industry to go naked and remove packaging, or to use ethical ingredients and to all this stuff. We don't have that time. So I would see us, I was looking at my position, looking at fine fragrance, looking at the resources that's available to a luxury market that's very profitable, but they choose to spend their money on the wrong things. And it's like, okay, we'll put that resource behind really partnering with people who know how to look after the environment. So it's not just about the ethical ingredients, it's about the partnership with those individuals and groups and communities that can do the work that actually will help save us.
And in terms of how profitable the industry is in 2020, and again, being the Christmas episode, you gave away 20% of your net profit to essentially a sustainable frankincense sourcing, which you named FFS, which obviously most will understand is not what you've called it for Frank's sake. But genius move. Is that something you're going to do again for Christmas 21?
At the moment, we haven't decided on that, but we would like to do some more fundraising. But the work with frankincense communities is something. It was actually kind of a part of the catalyst for me to start And in the first place. I'd been, as part of a Lush trip, we went out to Somaliland, we saw frankincense, we saw the issues with frankincense, and we saw the issues with with climate change impacting on communities there. It wasn't just frankincense, it was also in terms of Somaliland, you have pastoral nomadic herders who had lost their herds. And so you started to see this impact of climate change impacting communities, creating displaced communities. Those displaced communities then require aid, which is difficult to deliver in a community in Somalia. And in general, it was this feeling that we have to be able to act fast and kind of do things quickly. So to be able to raise funds, and the obvious thing, it's a little bit simplistic, but frankincense doesn't rejuvenate very easily in the wild. It takes a long time to grow. It can be grazed, it can be over harvested, which is the issue that we're worrying about now, in that it puts too much pressure, because I don't know. It's interesting with frankincense in particular, coming up to Christmas, everybody knows frankincense. Everyone goes, of course I know frankincense. And then you say, okay, what is it? And then everyone goes, oh, actually, I don't know. I just remember singing about it. And
it just goes with and myrrh, doesn't it?
Yes, yeah. I think people remember dressing up as the star or the shepherd or, whatever. And then they go, actually,
I was the horse or the donkey.
Okay, I don't know if we read too much into that or not.
I mean, what were you?
You know what? I was the donkey. Now I think about it.
It's where you say you're Jesus.
Yes. No, I never got. No, I don't think I got. I think I managed to get maybe 2 lines in a nativity. I've always sort of been slightly begrudging of that. But
yes, I didn't even get one.
But yeah, I think with frankincense, it's just a very interesting ingredient, and the fact that you could start to replant these and bring some life back to a community is great.
So go on. What is frankincense?
It is a resin. So it is a sticky sap that comes from...
I knew this. I knew this,
Okay.
Simon. I did know it was a resin because it's a bit like sap, isn't it? And I remember at school you have bugs in sap and it's that kind of colour.
Yeah.
Is it similar to that?
It's very similar, yeah. It's not quite the sort of Jurassic Park amber, but it's a sort of... they call them golden tears. So you'd mark the tree, you'd slice the tree, you'd leave it for a few days, maybe a week or two, come back and then you have a look at the sap that's sort of hardened on the outside of the tree and collect that. And that's the oil-rich resin. And then that gets sorted, and then you can use that either just as incense, which is still a very popular material, or as essential oil that can go into perfume.
Okay, I've actually amazed myself that I knew vaguely what frankincense was, and I think everyone in here is also completely baffled. But in terms of sustainability and the way that people are talking more and more about this, Prince William's Earthshot only recently awarded a couple of million quid to individuals in different nations, essentially. How has banging the drum of sustainability changed over the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and indeed over your career?
It's a good question because it's something that it's an interesting, as I mentioned, like feeling like you were sort of on the front end, if you like, of a particular movement for a while, and as that suddenly becomes mainstream, you have this sort of conflicting where you quite enjoyed it being niche and knowing all this stuff, and then all of a sudden it's out in the wider world and everybody's got an opinion, and actually some of what I've been doing or other people have been doing, it may be challenged or it may need to be updated. So which really fundamentally is exactly what you want. You want a shampoo bar market, you want the fragrance sector to sort of get annoyed with you and start doing all the sustainability stuff, because it will take every single person and every single effort to be able to really start putting the world right. And I think that from that perspective, it's encouraging. I don't always know whether it's going to come from the top. I don't know if COP26 will be the panacea that everybody wants it to be. I think that actually their individual action and groups of individuals is really this kind of the most successful thing I've seen. Communities really rising up to a task and developing that. Businesses rising up to a task and developing those resources. And that, I think, makes me nervous because I want it to be done perfectly, but at the same time you can't be like that about it. And I think it also makes me excited that so many more people are moving into that sphere, but it has to be done genuinely. The greenwashing and all that still goes on, but I think people themselves as customers, as consumers, are becoming much, much more savvy and are demanding a huge amount more. So I think all that's great.
What's the one thing that businesses should be fundamentally focusing on in order to achieve that over time?
I think it is really kind of the restoration of the natural world. I think that if you really get down to it, although there's lots of technological fixes which I can't even pretend to understand half of them, I think that what the crisis that really is emerging is that we, as a civilization, as a society, we haven't got the knack of enriching life. And it's that is missing. So we've got the knack of extracting it, making it into something else, trading it, incredible economies, incredible universities, all this sort of stuff. But if you look at why I'm interested in indigenous communities, is they have existed within their ecosphere for millennia in many cases, and have had to fit to a life-giving way of living. And I think that is the number one. So ecological land restoration and bringing back extinct species. I don't mean kind of dinosaurs, but I do mean kind of species that were lacking in your landscape, say rewilding, all of these kind of aspects, and they then will sequester carbon, and they will give you so much more. So I think that would be my number one.
In terms of throwing the towel in, has your wife ever said to you, yeah, bugger this isn't going to work for me? Have you ever thought, actually, I can't be bothered to do it anymore, I'm going to just go into another avenue or do something completely different?
No, actually I haven't. Maybe I should have.
Yes.
Now you're mentioning it. It's kind of
don't let me influence it, Simon.
It's going to be a slightly awkward podcast, isn't it? By the end, I'm not doing what I started.
Exactly. Resigned.
Yeah, no, I haven't thought about that now, because I feel like I am at this point very passionate about the things that I'm doing, and I also know that it's a long game. There isn't a quick way round, and oddly enough, although fragrance is a big industry and it's well catered for and there's lots of new releases and all that sort of stuff, when you really drill down into it, it's I think it was said best by a lady that I talked to, who said it's intangible and it takes time for people to really associate themselves with perfume and feel comfortable with it, and it becomes a signature. And it's not the same as a cosmetic, and this is the other difference. It's not the same. If you buy something that you think is going to be good for dry skin, you can see it's got an impact on your skin then and there. If you buy fragrance, it's definitely something that, what we see is this journey where people come in, they try a bit, they come back later, and it is something that gradually sort of they succumb to. So it's really, we know it's a long burn. So I'm 2 years in, but over 2 years in, but it really is only just starting.
And can you see genuine growth, or is there an element of just plateauing or sort of stagnating at the moment in terms of whilst that market becomes aware of what you guys are? Obviously, people aren't necessarily going to come back in swathes. Can you see it growing over the next couple of months?
Yeah, we've definitely seen growth. I think we've got both from this distribution point of view, you can see kind of buying habits have shifted a bit. I think they were more comfortable online, and now they're kind of interested in the shop or interested in seeing product up close, because that was our other concern, was would people even buy perfume online during a pandemic, but they did. And then we're seeing growth, and we're seeing kind of nice healthy growth. I think stuff that you can actually is sustainable for a small team. And it does feel like we're getting people, repeat customers, and the sampling and all the things that are kind of starting to really work. So yeah,
that's good. And in terms of your team, you've got a team of 4 at the moment, of which your wife is one of them. Chris, I'm assuming, is your business partner is the other. Who's the fourth? Is that the other Chris? Chris squared?
We have So we have Chris and Chris, me and Vicky, and then we have a small team in the shop. We have Sue, who's working on our PR, with guy Josh doing some social media, and then Marta and Katie in the shop.
Oh right.
And then Chris has favours that he draws on from several people that remain nameless for now.
And you've managed to do all of this with less than 100,000 quid with all of those team members.
Yeah, it's been quite a nice sort of juggling act, I'd say.
That's incredible. That is incredible. And in terms of, I suppose, from an upskilling point of view, have you ever had to look at the business and go, right, I don't actually understand this element because I've never dealt with it before from an accountancy point of view or from a management point of view, and have to actually upskill and learn above and beyond what you'd initially thought?
Yeah, I mean, one of the other things that I felt like it was the right time for me to strike out on my own was this opportunity to understand establishing a business in full. Having grown up within a business is incredible, and I've learned a lot along the way, and I've seen most aspects of it, but actually to create something yourself and then be involved in all the elements. And when you get to a very large company, it's very difficult. Their silos emerge, you get all these and it's all very complex. And at a very small level, you can do a little bit of everything. So from that point of view, I quite enjoyed the sort of multitasking of it. But having said that, quite quickly, it's been evident what I'm good at and what I'm not good at.
Go on, what are you bad at?
I can make a perfume, no problem. Can I fill a bottle and make sure it doesn't leak? That's slightly more of an issue. I did try that very briefly, and I was warned off doing that.
How hard can it be to just put some liquid in a bottle?
That's what I was told when all my bottles leaked.
Right.
That's exactly the comments that were made to me.
All I've ever filled up is a glass of water, and that tends not to leak. But in terms of your fragrance bottles, what's the process that's different there?
It's not particularly complex. I'll be honest, I'm just really bad at it. We have got a good team that are willing to sort of do it and do a good job, so I'm very grateful.
Is that like when you go and make a cup of tea for your team and you make it badly so they don't ask you again? Did you strategically cock it up?
There's a touch of that, yeah. We sort of like, you do the washing up badly enough and people
just don't bother asking you ever again.
But without pushing it so far, they never allow you in the building. So I'm sort of in that camp. And I'm not, my wife was not keen to have me on the shop floor. I kind of a little bit, as you remember Black Books and Bernard Black, there's that kind of, sometimes I can be like, and then I've got people coming in and they want to buy stuff, and then I've got to restock everything and then fill it. And it's like, she's like, that's not the best attitude.
You're trying to sell this stuff, not hoard it.
Yeah. So I'm a back of house guy, I think.
What do you reckon you wish you'd learned or known, I suppose, when starting? And what was the first thing that you learned that you took with you?
Well, apart from that there was a global pandemic imminently coming across over the horizon. Apart from that, I think just my patience levels. I've never thought I was overly patient, but I thought I was quite methodical. But especially in the first sort of 12 to 18 months, I just wanted to get ahead of myself. And it's taken me time to sort of settle in and go, no, this is the pace. This is what's it's all about.
And do you think post-pandemic you're going to be even quicker, though, because the world is back up to speed and you've just had to slow yourself down ever so slightly?
Actually, I think I think when I look at it, I think that we have been at, because I've also had a few other projects that I've been working on, so we have been at a point where that probably is what we can cope with at the moment, and I think, and it's healthy, and it, like you say, it's growth and moving in the right direction. So I think for where we're at, I think it's been perfect. And then, then it will be, I think I had a series of I still have a series of markers in my mind where, they're almost like gateways. This is just experience from watching businesses grow, that at certain kind of rough turnover points, you get to a certain viability here and you get to a certain series of problems there, and yeah.
And what do they look like? You say that you've seen those in previous businesses then over the next forthcoming 2, 3, 4, 5 years. What are those forecast issues that you have to deal with?
I think it's sort of intriguing to look at, is big better? I think there is that inherent thing where being bigger is better. You can have more impact, you can do all these things, and definitely to a certain point that is true. But having kind of seen everything from literally 100,000 turnover through to 1 billion, looking at that spectrum, there are certain points on there where they bring as many challenges as they bring benefits, and it could be anything. It could be you have shareholder issues, or it could be that you have growth issues, and how do you keep up with the demand, or all of these kind of different pieces. They all bring challenges. So, and they're all kind of embedded even in a small business. I look at a small business, and I'm surrounded by them here and elsewhere, and I look at Lush as a larger business. I think those same challenges are there. Getting messages through a company starts from as soon as you've got one employee, and it doesn't get any easier until you have 30,000. So those kind of things, they just are, it's human nature kind of thing. So
in terms of, looking at yourself from a human nature standpoint or an individual element, you say you get frustrated, you say that if you're not going quick enough, it annoys you basically. How do you actually manage, I suppose, ordering all the things that you want to do and delegating to people accordingly?
Well, it depends who you ask. If you ask me, I think I do a wonderful job.
What would Chris say?
Yeah. What would Chris say? He'd say, will you please leave me alone? I've just got back off holiday and I've already got a list of about 500 things to do. And if you talk to my wife, she's kind of like, can you just dial it down a notch? In fact, we've had those kind of conversations where it's kind of, can you just turn it down maybe just sort of 10 to 20%?
Come back to me next week, please. I need to go to sleep.
Yeah.
But in terms of how you manage yourself then, obviously, from external point of view, fine, they might not think you're doing it that well, but how do you qualify, quantify, and actually make sure you do things methodically?
I think that would be the biggest difference, I'd say, between working in a large company versus starting something yourself. You've got to be so much more economical with your time, even though I think there's this, I think with business, there's always this inference that everybody's so kind of regimented and clip-clop and all that. But actually, I found it that you don't really have that time available to you when you're in a small startup business because of the sheer number of tasks that need to be done in a day. I want very many more to-do lists, and I kind of been so much busier from that perspective, just in kind of solving problems and overcoming things. And I don't feel like that's brought stress. So I would say that I don't feel like that's a huge stress on me, but I do feel like it's kind of, there's lots and lots of kind of tasks to do, and you have to be very economical, and you have to step back regularly, look at what you're doing, say, okay, I'm worrying about the bins out the back, but should I actually be worrying about signing this distribution deal, or do you know what I mean? So making sure that you're kind of constantly making all of those decisions move you forwards.
In terms of mental health, a massive subject at the moment. People are talking about it, and rightly so. How has starting a business impacted your mental health? Because it does take a huge toll on an individual. Actually,
I felt like it boosted my mental health, which sounds kind of...
Was it that bad working for your dad? Christ.
Well, there was that, but that, I think that me being able to sort of start out on my own meant I was, as Vicky's auntie actually said, captain of my own canoe, which it definitely felt like. It definitely felt like being in a very small seagoing vessel as a tsunami came in, and just paddling like crazy and hoping that you sort of catch the wave and not succumb to it. But having said that, I have felt that for a number of different reasons, I think. And I think that it's been able to sort of be master of your own destiny. I think that suits my personality a bit more. And I think being able to sort of control those aspects of things. There are a number of things at Lush which that had become very tough for me in that regard. I also think that I knew more concisely what I want to achieve, which also helped. So I'm much more singular and so if you're asking and going back to Gorilla, and the difference with Gorilla to And is that I brought the different elements of my kind of thinking and passion into that. So the ethical ingredients and solving climate change issues, and kind of focus on that as part of my day-to-day, as well as the fragrance, all in the same space, is what I wanted to do.
What does, I suppose, happiness and success then look like to you? Is it the legacy of your kids joining the business over time?
I wouldn't have said I mean, it's interesting because I was never actually pushed into working at Lush, and neither were my siblings. We all kind of found our way in. And that's, I think, going back to that question you asked about passion and would I have been doing this thing? Well, probably not, but definitely we attached our passions to the opportunities that were there in the business at the time. And for my children, I think that ultimately really what I'm focused on and interested in is kind of making sure that I've made every effort I can in terms of the ecological health of the planet and kind of what that looks like. That is more my priority, and having a nice business that kind of does that, I think would be something that could be an asset for them, but they don't have to work in it or do anything like that. I don't have a full succession plan there.
In terms of Christmas, okay, just around the corner, what is the best perfume for Christmas?
Any of mine. I would say, well, frankincense is the obvious one. So we've got, ours is called Frank. So it's as simple as that, and it's frankincense from Somaliland. I would also say Bean has a nice warm kind of, so it's tonka, which is like this nice warm vanilla hay kind of note that's got a little touch of fennel, orange, and it's kind of got that nice Christmassy vibe. Or if the weather's poor, if it's cold and rainy or snowing, then Bear, which is Douglas fir, shore pine, and western red cedar. So you've got this kind of nice, almost Christmas tree.
Sounds quite Canadian.
It is Canadian. It's from the Great Bear Rainforest in Canada.
I'm baffled that I knew what frankincense was, and I've just guessed a perfume. Honestly, I'm in the wrong business, Simon. If there's ever an opening, just give me a bell. How can we find you guys to buy your perfume?
Andfragrance.com is the easiest way online. And then we have our shop. It's on Kingland Crescent in Poole, High Street. We're in Bobby's in Bournemouth, and we'll hopefully be looking at new and broader distribution soon.
Wonderful. Simon, have a great Christmas with the family. I will speak to you hopefully very soon.
Thank you very much.
Take care. Thanks for listening. Coming up next week.
Oliver, business is risky. You've got to read the situation at the time. You've got to be willing to back yourself, and you've got to have enough money to be able to pull it off. As we've grown, I think our opportunities have got bigger and our horizons have extended out. Always we've tried to be a financially sound business.
Thank you so much to our headline sponsors for the year, Capsule Cover. Capsule Cover, a specialist insurance partner to growth businesses, supports some of the UK's most innovative and ambitious companies. Sponsoring each and every one of our podcasts, we're on a journey with Capsule, and so should you be. If you're a scale-up or an ambitious, high-growth business, check out how Capsule Cover can help you with bespoke insurance solutions. Inquire via capsulecover.com and quote Success22. See you next week, 8 a.m. on all podcast platforms. Simply subscribe or ask your smart speaker to play Success is in the Mind podcast. This is a Pinpoint Media podcast presented by me, Oliver Bruce, produced by Dan Miller and Fergus Bruce, edited and designed by Harry Fox and Victoria Bramwell, filmed by Madeline Harris, marketed by Ellie Hanwell and Rachel Buchanan Hughes, and managed by Bethan Wyatt and Annabelle Lawton-Smith. Quite a team. Thanks, guys. If you know anyone you think we should interview, if you want to tell your story or have your say, please reach out to me directly via podcast@pinpoint-media.co.uk. Remember, there's never a good time to start a business, but in business, you should always have a good time. Cheers, guys.